Seven Psychopaths. So, written and directed by Martin McDonagh, who, of course, was a very, very celebrated playwright, bagged an Oscar for his short film Six Shooter, which was described as Ken Loach meets Quentin Tarantino, and then got an Oscar nod for the screenplay for In Bruges, which was variously described as Father Ted meets Quentin Tarantino. Now, Seven Psychopaths, first big American feature, which is being described as Charlie Kaufman meets Quentin Tarantino. You may be beginning to see a trend here. So the story is Colin Farrell is a screenwriter adrift in Hollywood. He's desperate to write a screenplay, but he's bereft of ideas. But he has a title, and the title is Seven Psychopaths. Sam Rockwell is a friend who wants to join him in writing the screenplay and wants to be credited with writing the screenplay. And he has this sideline, he makes his money in it with a dog kidnapping business. He and Christopher Walken are in cahoots together. They kidnap dogs and then wait for the ransom to be, somebody says, if you find my dog, I'll give you money. And then Christopher Walken takes the money back, takes the dog back, and then they get the money. Sam Rockwell thinks that the best way to get Colin Farrell's inspiration is to round up a bunch of psychopaths and puts an advert in the press which says basically, are you a psychopath? In that case, get in touch with us because a screenwriter wants to talk to you. However, Colin Farrell's main problem is that although he's writing something called Seven Psychopaths, he wants to write something that is life-affirming and nice and uplifting and not just your standard Hollywood schlock fare. Here's a clip.
Hans, I'm trying to write something about the kinds of things you're talking about. Yeah. Would you like to help write it with me?
You said I could help write it with you.
Yeah, we can all help write it with me.
He doesn't even want to help write it with you. His wife just died.
I don't mind helping as long as it isn't going to be too violent.
Of course it's going to be too violent.
That's the whole point. I told you 20 times, Billy. I don't want it to be violent. I want it to be life-affirming.
Life-affirming? Schmife-affirming. It's about seven psychopaths.
Hey! No, you know what I think the movie should be? The first half should be like a perfect setup for an out-and-out revenge flick.
Yeah.
Violence, guns, all the usual bullshit. And then, I don't know, man. The lead characters should just walk away. They should just drive off into the desert and pitch a tent somewhere and just talk for the rest of the friggin' movie. No shootouts, no payoffs, just human beings talking.
What are we making, French movies now?
Which is a good gag. Here's the thing with Seven Psychopaths. It is a classic case of wanting to have your cake and eat it as well. And the line particularly to which everyone has referred is that there's a line when Christopher Walken is reading the script. I mean, this does owe certainly a debt to adaptation, which remember this Charlie Kaufman thing in which Nick Cage's two characters are attempting to adapt something without falling into all the Hollywood cliches, but the movie allows itself the liberty of falling into those cliches in order to demonstrate what it's trying not to do. In the case of this, McDonagh started out by saying actually what he wanted to do was to see whether it was possible to make a kind of violent action movie that quotes Gandhi and is in fact pacifist. But on the other hand, you want to have all that cinematic stuff. You want to have Joshua Tree. You want to have the great. You want to have the shootout in the graveyard. So you allow yourself to have your writer complaining about doing all that stuff while simultaneously doing it. And the key line, which is quoted in pretty much every review, is that Christopher Walken says your women characters are lousy, and this is sort of like a way of getting yourself off the hook, which is that you write a thing which is completely male dominated, in which your women characters are lousy, but you allow one of the characters to say your women characters are lousy. There is similarly a whole thing about the subplot, which is set in motion, is that they steal a gangster's Shih Tzu dog, and also all the way through there's this sort of hunt for the dog, and there is a whole thing about what's going to happen to the dog. And the Hollywood law is you can behave as appallingly as you want to women characters, but you must never harm or damage an animal. And so there's a lot of stuff about that. Now, the question is, does just talking about something allow you off the hook for making those mistakes? And the answer is, well, it might do if you do it with real zing and real humour, make it really sharp and scabrous. In the case of In Bruges, which I saw again just a couple of weeks ago, I was really knocked out by how dark and how scabrous and how funny In Bruges is. In the case of Seven Psychopaths, the problem is Martin McDonagh has got a great ear for dialogue, but it does seem awfully baggy and somewhat self-indulgent. And the worst criticism of it is this. Saying that Six Shooter is Ken Loach meets Quentin Tarantino is lazy. Saying that In Bruges is Father Ted meets Quentin Tarantino is lazy. But saying that Seven Psychopaths is Charlie Kaufman meets Quentin Tarantino is actually painfully close to the mark. It's the first movie he has made in which the Tarantino comparison has been fair, in as much as it's flippant and fast-talking and ultimately empty, and actually rather in need of a little more rigor. The best Tarantino movie Tarantino ever made was the least Tarantino-ish movie he ever made, which was, Jackie Brown, which I think is wonderful. And the next one we got Django coming up very soon. But in the case of this, partly because we expect so much from Martin McDonagh, partly because he has such a brilliant way with words, and he really does. I mean, when he's on fire, he is properly on fire. He can write a line that can make you simultaneously gasp and laugh. You think, I can't believe somebody actually said that out loud, but you're laughing at the fact that they did it. In the case that there is plenty that is funny. In fact, when you see the trailer for this, which is cut very hard and very fast, and it is literally just the sappy one-liners, you think, wow, the movie must be better than my experience of actually watching it. But when you're actually watching the film, you do think, okay, self-referentiality will get you off the hook to a certain point, but it is only to a certain point. So my feeling with it is that he remains a terrific writer, and he remains a great, I think a great potential talent. And the cast is, it's a really good cast. It's a cast. So I turned to Christopher Walken. The cast is a good cast. It's crazy. It's funny. You got to see. Aha.
Who's that?
Christopher Walken. Well, actually, it's Kevin Spacey doing Christopher Walken,
Yes.
which is obviously not quite the same thing. And there is stuff in there to like. But the problem is, it is all in a great big sort of spread out melange of partial self-referential apology. And I just think that it needs to be slightly more than that. There's also, Mickey Rourke was at one point cast in the thing, and then he fell out, and then he's not in it. And there is you'll see it, you'll notice it. There is a sort of a raised finger to Mickey Rourke in the middle of the film somewhere. But when you start noticing that stuff, it means that everything else isn't quite coming together. So not without pleasure, not without the fact that, it's a Martin McDonagh movie. Of course, you're going to get, good one-liners and all that stuff. And yes, the cast are fun, and, Tom Waits as a rabbit carrying, so all that stuff, great. But after In Bruges, it's ill-disciplined, and it does have at its centre a writer who is somewhat lost. And the fact of the matter is, there is more autobiography in that than perhaps would have been good for the film.